Welcome to The Right to Reason. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Question: what causes school shootings? Guns, games, movies, bullying. Many have suggested that perhaps there's a link between school shootings and childhood medication. Today we're going to be talking once again with Michael Moore.
I'm an occupational therapist that works with children with disabilities. Autism, ADHD are primarily the cases that I've been working with for over 10 years, pursuing continuing education in those fields. And I currently work in the city of Detroit. I see the diversity of difficulties in sort of a modern dystopic society.
This should be a very interesting discussion. Before we get to that, I want to remind you that you can support the broadcast at patreon.com/right and find all of our content at therighttoreason.com. I've gotten some emails recently that I wanted to share with you guys. Two of them are about the recent debate with Eric Lounsbury. If you haven't checked that out, that was episode 49, I believe. Keith says, "Hi, great debate/discussion. I'm a new listener of yours, and I wanted to add something that perhaps you could use in future debates. When Eric kept insisting for another explaining, if I recall correctly, for another explanation, I think is what he meant, if I recall correctly, for what appears to be a burnt piece of paper, he's ignoring basic stuff like what illusionists do all the time." And then he goes on to recommend a TV show from True TV called The Carbonaro Effect. It's a magic TV show. He finishes by saying, "If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's an excellent show and insight into how people jump so quickly to these conclusions, especially after being primed to believe this stuff to begin with. Thanks for the discussion. I'll check more of them out. Sincerely, Keith." Thanks, Keith. Here's some debate tips from Darren. He says, "You did great. With a person like that, you really can't do anything other than what you did. Point out how truly crazy his argument is." Some questions I would like to see asked if you get a chance to talk to him again. How did he rule out the options that humans don't know about as to sources of specified complexity? How did he rule out chemistry from being the origin? If he only ever saw a white swan, does that mean black swans don't or can't exist? Very good. How did he determine that magic / the supernatural is the possibility for specified complexity? How did he determine there is no life on other planets? And then lastly, the total energy of the universe is 0, so the creator doesn't actually have to be that powerful. I got a really special message from one of our patrons, Larry Wilson. He says, "I'm willing to donate because you have an interesting podcast which has covered a variety of topics, usually one-on-one with the subjects of your interview. You have modified your interviewing as you've become more experienced in podcasting. I've listened to every podcast, even though I haven't commented on every one, and have enjoyed them all. So I have found this to be a good investment of my time and my money, and will keep doing it." He went on to say, "By the way, I would suggest something that I haven't heard anywhere, but have an interest in this issue." I love suggestions like this. "I've reached the age where I should know what I'm about. I've had a lifetime full of experiences, but I've suddenly reached the conclusion that I was wrong about me. In fact, I've come to realize that I was wrong about a number of important things about myself, but I feel more relaxed and calm than I have since." The question is, do people who reject Christianity at a later age change in more satisfactory ways than people who reject it earlier? That is an interesting question. Are they able to enter their sunset years feeling happier than those who rejected earlier? Am I normal and not really examining my life until I retired? Rather than when I was in my 40s or 50s? I became an atheist at age 18, but now I'm 70 and suddenly realized things that I should have known about myself at 19. That is a very critical way of viewing yourself, I think. Anyway, I hope that makes sense, but I have no idea who I would interview or get in touch with to discuss the issue, so if you don't want to try to address this issue, I don't blame you. I feel better, though, just writing this. Keep up the good work, Larry. Thanks so much, Larry Wilson. And Larry just recently increased his pledge amount, so that is really sweet of you, Larry. Thank you. Great idea. I think I know just the guy. In fact, it's kind of funny. Another patron that I could ask about that. He really specializes in that stuff. A guy named Phil Calderon. Also, I'm looking forward to doing a discussion with a gentleman that just dropped a documentary on this topic named Ben Fama Jr. He was recommended to me by the author of Alpha God, Hector Garcia, which we did a really, really great discussion a few episodes back if you just want to look for the episode called Alpha God with Hector Garcia. And that's the mailbag today. If you care to write in the show and have it read on air, just let me know. Put that in your email. I love hearing from you guys. All your advice is very helpful. Without further ado, let's begin episode 51, Drugging the Shooter.
the Right to Reason podcast.
If you base the design of rockets on science, they reach the moon. It works. Bitches.
Esquire recently released an article called The Drugging of the American Boy that says by the time they reach high school, nearly 20% of all American boys will be diagnosed with ADHD. Millions of these boys will be prescribed a powerful stimulant to normalize them. A great many of those boys will suffer serious side effects from those drugs. The shocking truth is that many of those diagnoses are wrong, and that most of those boys are being drugged for no good reason, simply for being boys. It's time we recognize this as a crisis. The Drug Enforcement Administration classifies stimulants as Schedule II drugs, defined as having a high potential for abuse and with use potentially leading to severe psychological or physical dependence. According to a University of Michigan study, Adderall is the most abused brand-name drug among high school seniors. In addition to stimulants like Ritalin and Adderall, Schedule II drugs include cocaine, methamphetamine, Demerol, and OxyContin. In a related article titled, When It Comes to School Shooting, Drugs Aren't the Problem, HuffPost starts out by saying, as absurd as it may seem, there is a myth that continues to grow after mass shootings, and that is that the cause of these shootings are psychiatric medications themselves. A January 8th letter to the Toronto Star headlined, Preventing Another Newtown, pointed out that the perpetrators of almost every mass shooting were on psychotropic drugs. An article in the conservative online magazine The American Thinker on January 9th by Charles Grant and Greg Lewis is titled, It's the Drugs, Stupid. On the CNN show State of the Union on January 13th, Tennessee Republican Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn stated that psychiatric drugs are linked to individuals who carried out these crimes. She was not challenged by the host Katie Crawley or any of the other panelists. Earlier writings about medications and drugs come from author Robert Whitaker in a Psychology Today blog. He talks about the role of antidepressants causing violence, not antipsychotics used to treat the delusions of psychosis, and states, in light of this finding, the many past shootings at school campuses and other public venues should perhaps be investigated anew by government officials, with an eye toward ascertaining whether psychotropic use may have, in the manner of an adverse event, triggered that violence. Today we're talking to Michael Moore. Michael, can you tell us about yourself?
Yes, I'm an occupational therapist that have been working with children with disabilities, primarily autism and ADHD, for more than 10 years.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for taking time away from your busy schedule to discuss this topic with us. Let's just dig right in, if that's all right. So, are drugs causing mass shootings and school shootings and that sort of thing?
No.
All right. Well, thanks for being here today, and we are.
Well, first of all, let's talk about the use of these medications in the population as a whole.
Okay.
So right now, the data that I've cobbled together, it appears to be about 11% of our school-age children, that's 3 to 17, appear to be on some type of psychoactive medication. That could be either for depression or ADHD. So we're looking at about 11%. Is that a lot? I don't know. It's shockingly more than our Northern European sort of nation counterparts, where it's only about 3% in Great Britain per se at this point in time. The way they do intervention with children is mostly through behavioral therapy. A couple considerations to begin with is, number one, how are we in the United States actually doing these interventions with children who have actual attention deficit problems? Two, are they being overdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, overmedicated, and undermedicated? Ironically enough, the evidence that I've come across is parents in general, on average, tend to be very reluctant to place children on medication. And that's been my personal experience in the school systems that I've worked in, is they don't even want to hear the institution of the schools to even bring up medication, even when you have a child, obviously with an attention problem where a behavioral intervention may not work. And that needs to be sort of sussed out even further too. You know, when do we medicate? When do we not medicate children? I've worked with children that are a danger to themselves and others. They have behavior issues. They have attention issues. They have all types of other types of psychiatric problems, and the parents are against the medication. There's really nothing the school can do at that point in time, and we're really placed in quite a bind.
And these situations, plural, that you're describing,
yeah,
the kid really does need medication, and sometimes parents just say no.
Yeah, I mean, I've consistently run into that. Parents are now, the media has been effective in demonizing these medications, and they are actually not used most of the time. I should be careful when I say that. They appear to be used very reluctantly, and after other types of non-medical interventions have actually been put in place. What are those interventions? Behavioral plans for children. Children then in general education are given then resource hours and resource time. That's a whole other classroom with the teacher giving them more one-on-one attention. Sometimes children are given an actual aid to help them, walk around with them throughout the day to help them maintain attention and things like that too. So school systems have been, in my experience, and this varies from state to state. And so, like I read one stat where in Kentucky, they actually have an 18% diagnosis of ADHD, as opposed to other states like Alaska, which have like a 4 or 5% or things like that. So in the United States, we've got this huge discrepancy in even the diagnosis of these problems of ADHD and other types of psychiatric issues as well. It's hard to make sweeping statements. I want to be very careful on your show not to overstate the case for that. There's a lot of other data that still needs to be sort of collected and understood in context. But to link these types of medications with shootings, I think is those publications you were reading off, I think that was just more media scaremongering. If we look at the Parkland shooter for a moment and look at his background, what appeared to me to be the most salient factor in this young man's life is his adoptive parents had just died literally within months before the shooting. That to me was the salient factor in that. Yes, his accessibility to firearms is to me crazy, but I'm not a gun person. That could be another show for another discussion. But the factor that you have this young man who was obviously emotionally troubled, but his sense of support, the only people in his life that had showed him any love, had just died. So getting a firearm and striking out against the school as an institution, and those students who he probably, and now I'm speculating, so please forgive me, who he probably were jealous of their articulateness, of their ability to actually, to succeed, to have everything he knew he would never have. How did he respond? He picked up a firearm and he sought out to destroy it.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of the students, just trying to look into the victims, they were the cool kids.
Yes.
It was students that had some form of leadership or popularity, and it was adults that also had some kind of leadership, obviously, because they were the authoritarians there at the school. So yeah, it seemed like his attack was against a very specific personality within the school.
Yes. Here we have a great example of society's victim becoming society's victimizer.
All right, Michael, it seems like you're just skipping over the corporatist constant invasion into our personal conversations with our doctors that's being perpetuated by Big Pharma. Okay, every time I go in a doctor's office, I see some kind of pens or free stuff, and I'm sure some kind of contribution to their personal bank accounts in some way, or something. Sure. That's got names of these big companies that say, hey, sell our drug, get these drugs, pump them into the people again and again and again. And it seems like you're kind of leaving this out. Okay. I mean, obviously we have a problem.
We do have a problem. And but I think that facet of it, in this instant with these drugs, it appears to me to be a bit overstated in the media. Pharmaceutical companies are not currently heavily marketing these drugs to doctors. They haven't in a while because of the pushback against these drugs. Matter of fact, I've read some journal articles where some of the children with ADHD might be under-medicated, actually. So it's worth considering.
So are you saying the solution is more drugs? Pump more of these chemicals into our kids?
No, not at all. I'm saying that the mere use of these drugs in and of itself is probably symptomatic of a larger societal problem as a whole.
Oh.
The high risk of education at this point in time. We're seeing more affluent Caucasian children on ADHD medication. Why? Because of, in those school systems, the high risk and the high pressure stakes put on education for the future. So parents want their children to compete because they want a better future for their children. That's a healthy instinct. However, they're seeing that as being more successful in school, and that success in school is being more and more narrowly defined. And the manipulation of the child's attention span as the medium through which the child actually is interacting in school is what's being addressed or being manipulated via medication.
See, this is why I love having you on the show. In case the listener doesn't remember, I don't know, it was a couple months back, maybe a year ago or something like that, but Mr. Moore was on here talking about autism, and it blew my mind, and somehow I felt very strongly about this, and somehow you have managed to blow my mind yet again on this topic. Are you saying, I'm going to say it back to you, you tell me if I'm getting it right, all right? The school shootings and the high level of medicating our children, these two things are correlated but not causal, in the same sense that maybe just like the school shootings, there's a larger underlying American cultural problem, just like our children getting all these drugs prescribed to them. Maybe there's an underlying cultural problem that it's not just the doctors doing some kind of evil marketing thing with big pharma. Maybe there's a bigger topic here, and that is American culture and American education. Am I kind of getting close to what you're trying to get to?
Yes. Yeah. The larger problem is basically American culture at large, essentially. After the shooting, I think I only came across one news report or one interviewer trying to talk about toxic male masculinity within American culture and the use of guns as sort of a panacea to that. It's sort of a tool, a totem of that. And I thought that was, okay, this person's kind of on the right road here with this. The problem we have with this topic of dealing with childhood psychological issues is that there's no obvious biomarkers. There's biomarkers for, type 1 diabetes. There are biomarkers for food allergies. Those are in fact increasing in our children. That's unequivocal. That is true. That is increasing in the child population. But there are biomarkers for that. So we all feel comfortable in talking about that. We feel comfortable in talking to doctors about that, and a medical regimen or a medication regimen determining that outcome. When it comes with these psychological biomarkers, there's no biomarkers for that. And so it's all kind of, it's much more difficult to sort of deal with. We're dealing with the art of psychiatry and the art of medicine more than the science of medicine at that point in time. And also, too, Robert, there's, if you think about what's going on in sort of modern sort of media culture right now, parents are, being made to be afraid of vaccines, and they're being made to fear these drugs. Oh, the one thing we could talk about, too, in your opening is the scheduling of these drugs along with cocaine and other forms of street drugs is, well, right now, isn't marijuana still a type 2 scheduled drug?
I think it's 1. I think they still have marijuana as a 1. Up there with heroin or something. Yeah.
And is that reasonable?
No, it's okay. Insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, and yes, Adderall, yes. Concerta, Vyvanse, and Ritalin, these types of drugs are stimulants. Oh, let me explain. Why do we give stimulants to children with attention problems? Shall we talk about that?
Yeah,
okay.
I would love to understand that, because that is something I don't get.
Why does that work? Okay, this is the best analogy that I've come across, and I've got it from a gentleman named Dr. Robert Taylor. And what he explained it as, imagine you have a high-performance car as your brain, but you don't have control of the gas and brake and clutch and gear shift. The addition of the stimulant allows for a more fluid communication between those brain structures and controlling those 3 or 4 variables so they better work for more fluid attention span in the child.
Wait. Okay. Go slow for me.
Sorry.
There's you're saying that this car, and the car being analogous to the mind of this young man, for example, that we're,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
okay. It's
Stay
racing super fast, right? And
Right.
he needs to shift gears or else this thing's going to wreck or burn up its transmission or something, right?
Correct.
And you're saying that this kind of stimulant allows him to do the mechanical operations necessary, and that without it, he's in big trouble, and he's not going to be able to learn, he's not going to be able to receive information, and he's not going to be able to function properly in any kind of social dynamic. Am I kind of getting it?
Correct. He has more, and we say he because majority of these children are male.
Okay.
Because as I think we spoke about in our previous interview, it's X chromosome dominant and it's right frontal lobe dominant. Yes, the ability for the child to sort of initiate, maintain, and terminate an activity and then filter their environment is much more difficult. And that stimulant allows the different mechanisms and the different structures of the brain to work more in concert with each other. So the child appears to have more agency and more control to ability to attend.
And these medications are treating a symptom of our culture, but not the actual illness of our culture. Is that a stupid question?
No, it's not a stupid question. I just think it's a very complex question, and I don't think it's easily answered. Because attention problems and ADHD and autism, these are real medical issues that severely affect millions of children, and they are related to brain structure and brain chemistry. However, their ability to make the child functioning and interfacing with culture's inability to interface back with that child and their disability exacerbates both situations. Again, we appear to have, or maybe we need to think about a more stressful, a goal-orientated culture. Our school systems have not been as flexible and have not been evolving the way they need to basically to deal with the current demands of the younger generations in a great many ways.
So in a way, we're drugging them for ourselves, is what I'm kind of getting from that, is we're drugging them so that they can function within the reality that we require of everyone to follow suit.
Exactly.
And keep in line, we will not accept any kind of variation.
Right. The one thing I learned as an occupational therapist, what I love the theory of being an occupational therapist, is that I learned that you really can't change people. You want to help them be more functional in their environment, and so you help to change their environment to make them more functional. But the school system isn't changing their environment to make these children more functional. They're actually just cramming them into this environment be damned, and making them more functional in that without addressing the previous mentioned, is the environment need to be changed.
And in respect to what you were referencing about parents being afraid to allow their children to be prescribed drugs and the fear of anti-vax and all of that kind of thing, I kind of wanted to lighten it up a little bit.
Sure.
Because I know that this is going to drive you crazy, and I just want to hear Michael Moore cringe. I got to play you this. Gloria Copeland recently was talking about the flu. And if anyone's not familiar with who she is, she's from the Kenneth Copeland Ministries. It's a super right-wing, religious right nut job thing.
Private jet and takes his son hunting. And
he is rich like a motherfucker.
Yeah, he got busted. He got busted for renting a big old private jet and taking his son's African hunting a few years ago.
I didn't know that. No, I have heard him.
It's Copeland, yeah.
I have heard him saying that he needs these donations because he can't go on regular airlines because people are demonic and people are, going to try to interrupt him, and he needs time to pray. And he can pray on his private jet in peace. So he really needs that money. And oh my God, if this iPhone didn't cost as much as it does, I would have thrown it across the room. But anyway, all right, here's Gloria. And she we really don't need people like you, Michael, because she's got the answer. So I appreciate all the advice you've given us today, but it's totally worthless. Apparently, all we have to do is follow Gloria's advice, so here it is.
Well, listen, partners. We don't have a flu season. We've got a duck season, a deer season. But we don't have a flu season.
Duck season.
And don't receive it when somebody threatens you with everybody's getting the flu. We've already had our shot. He bore our sicknesses and carried our diseases.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we stand on. And by his stripes, we were healed. If you've already got the flu, I'm going to pray for you right now, Father. I pray for every person that has symptoms of flu. I'm asking you, Lord, with your supernatural power, to heal them now from the top of their head to the soles of their feet. Flu, I bind you off of the people in the name of Jesus.
Oh,
Jesus himself.
What the actual fuck? Like, I'm trying to play the whole thing. I'm just...
I don't even know how to begin to...
let me finish it. I'm sorry. I couldn't. I can't. I can't.
Gave us the flu shot. He redeemed us from the curse of flu, and we receive it and we take it, and we are healed by him.
Okay, so does that mean that if someone has the flu that they're a sinner? I don't get it. That's some victim blaming right there. I mean, what?
I don't know. I think there was I forget. I read an article where
like we're not supposed to have the flu because God died for our sins, and flu is sin. It's like equivocating sickness with bad behavior. Hey, I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
Wasn't there a Northern European country? Was it Iceland or something that had fundamental religious beliefs kind of diagnosed as a mental illness?
Oh.
I have to look this up. Don't quote me, but I think it was like was it Finland or Norway?
I don't know if that's the way to go, man.
I don't know if well, I mean, listen. I mean,
a lot of it. Here's my thing. No, I'm with you. This bitch is crazy, but a lot of it is like I think that this crazy kind of stuff attracts the crazies, right?
Sure.
But I don't think it causes it. I don't know. You're the professional. What do you think?
Oh, I'm not a professional in that regard. That lady needs a real professional, and I certainly don't have the credentials to dissect her.
She would eat you, Michael. She would eat you alive. Yeah.
His stripes. Amen. You know, the Bible says he himself bore our sicknesses and carried our diseases. And by his stripes, we were healed. When we were healed, we are healed. So get on the word, stay on the word. And if you say, well,
Okay, the whole by his stripes we're healed. I hear that all the time. I grew up in this bullshit. And it's just a line. You know, the whole by his stripes we are healed thing, the only reason that was inserted was to make it sound like Old Testament, the people that contributed to what we now call the New Testament, right?
Correct.
They were trying to mimic the wording of the Old Testament to make it sound as if we are meeting certain prophecies, because Jesus Christ didn't meet any of the prophecies of Judaism. He didn't meet one, not one. But they'll just use little lines and be like, hey, look, and in the Old Testament it says something about stripes, and by his stripes we're healed. It's like, what the, and the fact that I hear this today in 2018 so often of saying by his stripes we're healed, it's like, dude, that expression didn't even make sense at the time that it was said. And it doesn't make sense today either. Like, that expression was just trying to trick the masses into accepting this new ideology, this new religion, this new variation on an old system. That's all it was.
When I stumble across people in my private life who start speaking this way, I ask them if they've read Lord of the Rings. and sometimes they've said maybe a little, or, The Hobbit or something like that. And then I say, now, be honest. Didn't it make more sense than the Bible? And usually I get a weird look back at me at that point in time.
I never thought of it that way. It did make more sense.
Yeah, and actually, funny, I was reading. They just released a 50th anniversary. Not to kind of change the subject, but it kind of makes me. It reminded me of something. Is they released a 50th anniversary edition of Lord of the Rings. Tolkien's son Ian edited it using his father's notes. Ian Tolkien made a comment that his father did have sort of an agenda of rewriting the Bible for more of a European culture.
Oh, like a Jefferson kind of thing.
Exactly. What if we rewrote the Old Testament and have it make more sense and make it more for the European cultures that he was seeing at the time. And that's why he included that's why Elvish has like old Celtic languages and Finnish languages and things like that too. And he uses a lot of Norse mythology as well. And so he did have sort of an agenda. I don't know how serious he was about that. I don't think he was trying to actually create a new religion, but I think it was kind of him just a mental exercise in what would a better Old Testament actually be like, or seem like, or appear like. How would it appear? What would be a better moral teaching? What would be characters that are more fully? Maybe
less rape. I don't know.
Yeah, less rape.
Let's throw that out. Just for starters.
More understanding, more forgiveness, more patience. I mean, that's what Gandalf was basically an example of. When Frodo was going to kill.
Gollum. He was like the Christ thing.
He was Christ thing. He says no
because he died and then came back white.
Yeah. Gandalf the White. Yes. So something to think about.
All right. This chick's got 30 seconds left. Let's do this, and then I'm going to let you go actually live your life.
Thanks.
I don't have any symptoms of the flu. Well, great. That's the way it's supposed to be. Just keep saying that. I'll never.
She's slurring. That's not just country. Okay, I grew up in the country. Now, I told you I'm from Dearborn, Michigan originally, but I grew up. I was born there, but I grew up in the South, and I understand slurring the words just a little bit. It's almost like molasses coming off of your bottom lip. You just let it drip out just a little bit. I get that, but she's drunk. She is clearly audibly intoxicated. I can tell.
I'm glad she's having a good time, I guess.
We are not.
Never have the flu. I'll never have the flu. Put words. Inoculate yourself with the word of God. He himself bore my sicknesses, carried my diseases. And by his stripes, I was healed.
Damn it.
I am healed. And Jesus is Lord. Hallelujah.
God. I got nothing else on that. You got anything else on that? She did the stripes again, though. She said that 18 times.
Yeah, what can you say to that? It's someone actively hallucinating. I don't know.
Yeah. Now that's the thing we need to be talking about with medication.
Yeah.
We need to quit medicating these old people so much, maybe. I don't know. Michael Moore, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you giving me a new perspective, because I did feel strongly about this, and I still do, but my perspective has changed, and hopefully the listener can agree that you've changed some ideas that we might have been thinking that have been kind of manipulated by media, or if it bleeds, it reads kind of content that we are constantly seeing, and hearing from a real professional about this is valuable and it's useful, and we need to be talking about stuff like this more and more. And I appreciate people like you contributing to that marketplace of ideas. So thank you for your time today, sir.
It's my pleasure. I'm always here to help. Thank you.
You're a good friend.
Thank you, sir. All right. Bye-bye.
Mike was great as always. Really made me think. My and Michael's conversation continues on, so feel free to stick around if you want to hear that. Music today was brought to you by aloststateofmind.com. I'm scheduling a visit on Dogma Debate in the near future. Darren, his scheduler, and I are discussing that appearance. I would appreciate your opinions on that. There's been a lot of controversy concerning David Smalley recently, and I want to know what you think. I myself enjoy the production and would be foolish not to recognize the big opportunity that would represent for this show to be presented to a very large listener base. If you aren't familiar with Dogma Debate, it's one of the largest atheist podcasts out there, along with some other heavy hitters like Seth Andrews and Sam Harris. Email me about that so I can get your thoughts. Next week is our 1-year anniversary. It's going to be a really fun show. Many of you have sent me your recommendations for best episodes and clips of the year, so thank you for that. We're also going to have congratulations from many of your favorite guests from the past, but until then, this has been The Right to Reason.
And I appreciate the stimulating conversation and the challenge of trying to.
Are you kidding me? This is all I'm getting, like, all the benefit here. Whatever. I'm glad you appreciate it, but this is totally. I'm the one benefiting.
You should see me at the gym in the sauna. I make a nuisance of myself. I try to get people talking. I ask why they think what they think.
That's cool.
I totally just and I try to just ask questions.
So this is just you. You're doing this all the time.
Yeah. No. I wanna live in a better place.
You want to do more podcasts? I know people.
Sure, I'm happy to do so. But, I tell people, like, I'm a fan of civilization. I love civilization. I love my fellow man. I want us to do a better job. There's no excuse for this. I agree with Sam Harris. It's only through conversation and understanding that we will actually improve our current state for ourselves and our neighbors, And that means addressing our biases. That means addressing our assumptions. That means being patient. That means being tolerant, but also too challenging people. Say, why do you think that? And I catch myself looking at people and saying, I'll politely ask you to rethink that. Let me politely ask you to consider this. Let me politely ask you to consider that. And to stay away from tribalist type of thinking, which is obviously having a horribly corrosive effect on our current political situation now, to where nothing gets done. We're just separated into these tribes, and we've demonized the other, whether the other is the pharmaceutical company or the other is this or the other is that.
Is there anything you wanted to plug?
No. I'm just
you're just a good fucking human being, Mike. That's so cool, man.
I'm lucky. I have a job where I have a lot of meaning, and matter of fact, this past week, a student that I've been working with for a couple of years,
wow,
he wasn't able to read before. This is a child who was, and he couldn't even, if you asked him to give him a pencil and sit down and write the alphabet, he couldn't do it. To be able to see him now do that just, that's worth $1 million. That's worth everything to me.
That hits me, man, because this part won't be, well, maybe what you said just then, maybe I'll add that, but I just speaking real to you, that not radio bullshit, but I really appreciate what you're doing, and that right there like spoke to me, because my son is dyslexic, yes. And just watching, dude, I remember early grades, I guess, before, because he's 5th now, so this is, and they figured it out. The school system caught on. I didn't. This wasn't me or the wife, They figured it out around, I want to say, 3rd grade. But I look back and I was, I wasn't like a real asshole or anything, but I was a fucking asshole. Because I'm like, you're not trying hard enough. You know what I mean? And it breaks my fucking heart looking back. Like, it's not like I was mean. Like, I'm not a mean dad, We would do different things, but I would, put M&Ms over top of the words, and if he says the word, he eats the M&M, or the peanut or whatever. Like, no, it wasn't all bad, but still, there was a lot of ignorance on my end where I was like, just not. I wish I would have known. You know what I mean? I wish I would have known.
Robert, it's okay. Our school systems are narrowly designed to deal with a child who is purely neurotypical, who purely has a nervous system that functions where they show up, they recognize authority, they're obedient, and they can stay on task. Anything outside of that throws a wrench into that machinery. And we've gotten better at dealing with that, these institutions have. That's why I have a job in it. They started hiring people like me to come into the classroom to pull students out and start giving them one-on-one help. But at the same time, the underlying institution is still a 100-year-old design.
Yeah.
And so don't feel bad. We're just all, part of this. We all sort of go along with how it's actually being done. But it's hard to, when something's not right, it's hard to actually slow things down and figure out, okay, what is the problem here? And I'm lucky enough to be in a position where that's kind of my job. They kind of call me in to be like, can you take a look at so-and-so in this classroom, Mr. Moore, and give us your opinion? I'm like, okay. Because I see them more than doctors do. I work with them more. I do these other things. And so, I get called in, and that's kind of my position in the school systems as an occupational therapist, as I'm called in to say, okay, there's a mismatch here between the child and the institution. What level of help and support does this child need? What can we do?
Maybe I will use that, what I just said. Because I have heard, like what I asked you where I was saying, hey, do you have anything critical, constructive criticism or something? I have asked other people that, and that was one thing they said, is they said, Robert, you're distant. Like, you're good at like doing like the well, welcome to the Right to Reason. If you act now, you get the WCW tickets. And, like, they're like, you're coming into that. You're getting your timing right and all that. But nobody knows you. You don't share anything. And that is actually my personality. And maybe I'll do that. I'm going to ask the wife, though, because I don't feel comfortable talking about that.
That's very
unless
important.
If she says go for it, I'm going to go for it. But
yeah, you should. No, you should. It humanizes you. And of course, that's what. Well,
I mean, that is kind of what we're talking about is here, the whole idea is or the theme of if it was a movie we're making, you and me, Michael Moore, Robert Stanley, executive producers of the latest episode of X-Files or whatever. The idea is where one of us is the ignorant one about this stuff that's going, what about this? What about this? What about that? And then you have like the educated guy that's calm and, composed and saying, well, here's da-da-da-da-da. It changes the mind of the listener, and I'll do musical stuff throughout for emotional effect. And then here's the real issue. The real victim are the kids, not just the kids that are getting shot, but also the kids that are needing to be diagnosed, but they're not the victim because they are diagnosed with this stuff or because they are, being treated with these drugs. We're needing to treat them. We need to deal with the real problem. And that's kind of the theme of the whole episode. And maybe it would be appropriate to say, I also understand how important this is from a personal perspective. Maybe. I don't know. I'll see. I'll weigh it out. Gregoria actually is, that's my wife's name. Oh. It's a shitty name. So.
Gregoria? That's a great name.
You think so? She hates it. She hates it. But anyway,
Gregoria.
What's her sort of cultural heritage?
But she Mexican.
Mexican.
And but she pretty much is like the executive producer of the show. Like every idea I have, I'm like, is this good? She's like, that's shit. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, did I sound too overbearing here? She's like, no, do more of that. I'm like, okay, cool. And she kind of makes the show. So I'll ask her. Anyway, all right, I'm gonna play this fucking video thing.
Okay, man.
And we're gonna wrap it up.